Kirill, I am so excited for you to be here. You know, knowing you, I got to know you in Bold in January. And 7 months ago seems like a year with everything that we've been going on. And I just remember the very first time I had even talked to you before Bold, and you were just hungry. And you were the one that actually raised your hand to Carl and said, I want to take a class. I want to learn what it means to be a leader. And I said, you're never gonna, well, Bold's a little different animal, so you're not going to just talk about it. You're actually going to be immersed into it. And I just remember you just so hungry. And that's you. It's just you're passionate about learning. You're passionate about people. But before we jump ahead, I'm actually going to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself to the rest of this world.
Awesome. Well, to all my California friends who are joining, I saw Dylan is on. Good morning. And to everyone who is in Denver and Texas, good afternoon.
That's right.
So first of all, I am just absolutely honored and super excited to participate in this. I've joined a bunch of these in the past and absolutely love just hearing people's stories. I think this is such a great forum to just let people kind of talk through their leadership experience and talk through their own life experience, and obviously there's some sort of takeaway from everything. So first and foremost, I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to join today, honestly, and to hear my story and to hear my take on leadership and learn a little bit more about me and hopefully gain some value in the process. So my name is Kirill Kniazev, and I was born in Moscow, Russia, in the 80s to a predominantly scientist family, no real business people in my world. So it's kind of ironic that I wound up working in marketing, I guess. But growing up in the Soviet Union, I moved to the US when I was 10. And so basically right after the fall of the Soviet Union, one interesting thing that some people may not know about the Soviet Union is that private commerce and business was really illegal in a sense. So one kind of funny anecdote I have about this actually is when I was about 7 and I was, I think I was in like first grade or I don't know, third grade or something like that. But we had these collectible toys that everybody was absolutely obsessed with, right? And so I decided that I was going to start trading people things for these toys and then selling these toys. And so what had happened is what actually wound up having the police called on me. Somebody reported me for engaging in commerce, and a policeman came to our elementary school and sat me down and basically said, like, you know what, business is not the way we do things here, and like you cannot be selling things. And so that was kind of my first foray into business right there. Frankly, it scared me, but fortunately, we actually moved several years later to the US, moved to New York City, absolutely beautiful city, so much diversity, so much culture there. Absolutely blessed with having a fantastic ESL teacher. A lot of people ask me, how come I don't have an accent? And I fully credit this teacher with just absolutely engaging me in regard to the English language and like building a passion in me and learning in that. I think the biggest challenge for me there was kind of understanding the culture. The language kind of came in and of itself after a year and a half or so, but the culture was a pretty big change for me. So really early lessons in adapting to your environment there, kind of sink or swim, right? Like you either understand your peers and you learn to fit in, or you don't. So that was really the first experience there. Wanted to go into marketing pretty early on. Not the greatest student in school, but always interested in advertising and just kind of the business side of things. Went to CU Boulder for a marketing degree and failed forward pretty hard there after 2 years. Basically took on too much, got burned out, and wound up actually getting suspended from school. At that point, I decided to do something very, very different for me. I was really kind of an introverted kid for the most part. And a buddy of mine at the time was working in commission-only sales. He was selling cell phones at the mall in Boulder, not far from where I was going to school. And he was like, "Hey man, let's do the sales thing. Like, come over. Like, I'm doing great. You'll have a great time." For me to stand in the middle of the mall and like talk to people was honestly like the most frightening experience really of all time. And working on 100% commission. Basically, you don't sell, you don't make any money. I was like, I'm gonna do it, right? Like this is that kind of like let's just jump in and see what happens, right? And wound up actually being very successful there. Almost like to some degree, it was a detriment. I wound up being successful enough that they promoted me to a management position, overseeing 2 different stores with like 12 employees. Had no experience managing people, employees at all. So that was it was a very fast learning experience that was pretty taxing for me. Also having to sell at the same time. So really started to kind of work on that, like understanding people's needs, knowing your audience. You know, it's kind of the topic of the discussion, but that was really it. And then I went into, you know, the professional world. My first job was at Crocs. Kind of struggled there, honestly, just with the passion that I have and the sort of knowledge that I had from marketing. I had a hard time communicating with people, and I kind of came into it with a big ego, thinking that like, you know, I'm a marketing graduate. I know everything about marketing. Like, we have to do it my way, and you guys like have no idea what you're talking about, you know? So that was like my first real kind of, had a lot of like personal conflicts there. I actually worked through all of them by my end of my tenure there, but it was a challenge for sure. So after that, it's really been startups and like high growth companies where I've really taken on like the sole role of a marketing person, managing vendors, and at this point managing employees at Modally as well. But really a lot of adapting, a lot of pivoting, working on limited budget and all that stuff. So really my formal leadership training began this year with Bold, which was frankly just an absolutely amazing experience. So that's kind of what brought me here so far.
So I'm going to actually take you back because both of your parents were scientists.
Yep.
So what type of research did they do?
Yeah, so my mom is a molecular biologist. She works on a bunch of different genetic stuff. She works on worm research on worms, doing some cancer research in the past. My dad is a mathematician. He was a professor for a long time at CU Boulder. Right now, he works for a startup in Boston working on quantum computing stuff. So very, very analytical people, right? Did not get any of the science genes at all from them. The only thing that I did inherit is the analytical thinking piece, but not so much the passion for science, I guess.
But you have the passion for people, and that's what, even coming from a family of scientists, your brain is like a scientist in the people side, in the hunger for learning. And I love just your story of taking us through, you know, as a child, you can't do commerce, and the police. Could you imagine the police coming to school for someone who's in like 1st or 2nd grade going, no, you can't do that, it's against the law, and you're over there just selling. But to be able to figure, you know, to adapt, and that's you. And in fact, that's your motto, right? Is adapt creatively.
Yep, that's it, exactly.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So how, giving us some of the story, where else have you had to adapt creatively?
You know, a lot of it really has been in that startup and high growth marketing world. Working on, like I said, very limited budgets often. We have very high stakes, right? It's make it or break it. Typically, organizations thrive or fail on the success of the sales and the marketing team. So learning to adapt to different sales folks that I've worked with in the past, learning to adapt my own strategies in terms of marketing, and really like exploring, you know, if a big company is doing something successfully, does that mean that we could replicate that? In many cases in the startup world, it just wasn't the case. So in a lot of situations, in some of the companies that were very successful, we did it by going against the best practices or going against what is an established rule, right? And one thing about me is like I'm like very opposed to authority. I'm a rule breaker. Like I will find ways to succeed, like, you know, without following the book. I love to read the books, but then I'm like, okay, how do I like take some concepts but do something new with it?
So it's the unique creative side, the rule breaker that shows up at 7 years old. So your parents must have been going, how do I handle Kirill? Like, what do I do with this kid?
Yeah, well, to be fair, my parents were very focused on their scientific careers for the most part, which was really interesting for me. I got to interact with a lot of very, very intelligent people early on,
Sure.
which I think was really good for me mentally to just kind of build a mindset that is, based on this intellectual discussions and all this stuff.
So you say you're an introvert, and through your life, you've put yourself in more of an extroverted role.
Yeah, I would say that I'm like a situational extrovert, right? Like I do very well in groups of smaller people. I don't really have any sort of issues with public speaking. I love to get out there and talk to people. I love learning about people, but I think that for me, like the biggest piece of that is introversion is that I have to find time to recover from that.
Yeah.
So it's an expansion of energy, not regeneration, right?
So how does knowing your audience play into what you're doing, what you've done? Because that was your topic.
Yep.
And why are you so passionate about that topic?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So this isn't like a prepared speech or anything like that, but just maybe some high level concepts. Knowing your audience is very important, relatively simple, but very important to marketing, especially if you are working in content marketing or email marketing. Really understanding uh, your audience and getting your message across in a way that resonates with them is super important, right? So I guess the way that I would visualize it in the most simple way is that at Modally, we have a pool of people out there, right? We have a database. There's thousands and thousands of people in this database. All of them have one common thread, right? The common thread for them is that they could benefit from our services. Many of them don't know that they could benefit from our services. Many of them are in different positions. We have people all the way from maintenance managers to facility managers all the way up to VP level. So there is some sort of interaction and positive value that we could bring to all of these people, but really trying to understand, how do we influence their behavior into wanting to learn more about Modally and being more open to our message, right? That's really important. So where that comes into play is segmentation, right? So what we're doing, and this is how it kind of applies to leadership, in my opinion, is we look at our database and then we start segmenting it, right? We look at what are the not maybe like ideal buyer personas, but really we start building out different personas for the people in our database, and we're saying, okay, John is a contractor and he wants to grow his business, so we're going to take a certain approach with John. We have Jeff, who is a facilities manager, and he's struggling with reactive repairs, for example, at his facility. So we have a different message that is going to work there, right? Different approach. Same with at the executive level, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of it just comes down to to providing the right message at the right time. And we do that by building trust and credibility. And I think the same could really be done within an organization, right? Like, let's say you have a large organization of thousands of employees, and you are in charge of leading several divisions of that company. When you start to look at employees at a company, while there may be a cultural fit, which is really important, right? You want to have the right person in the right seat. You also have different personas. So a person that works in sales is going to be different than a person that works in customer service. A person who is a developer is going to be different than a salesperson, right? So each one of these people has their own kind of their own values and strengths and weaknesses, right? So understanding that audience and being able to speak to them in a way that resonates with them is effective leadership, in my opinion.
So what happens if, as a marketer, and you're out there bringing people in and you're helping them with their messaging? What happens if they don't agree with your messaging? Because we all have different viewpoints, we see different things, and yet you're doing everything you can to connect with them. What happens if they don't agree with you?
So that's a fantastic question. One of my favorite books right now is called Persuasion. It's by Robert Cialdini. And so the focus of this book on persuasion is essentially priming people to resonate with that message, right? So we're trying to avoid that very specific issue that you're talking about, where people would disagree with our message, by building credibility, by providing value through the different content that we create, and priming these people for our outreach, right? So the inbound approach is we say, okay, we're experts in HVAC technology, and so here's information that is helpful for you. And once we've kind of built that trust with them, I would say, then we can do a little bit more outbound communication, right? And then we draw them in, and they're already more receptive to our message because we have built ourselves as a credible source, right? We've provided a value for them and asked nothing in return. And now we're basically reaching out and asking for a favor, like, hey, would you like to essentially hear what we have to say?
Well, in knowing, so when you say knowing your audience, and I look at it all different areas, whether it's business, whether it is relationship, whether it's playing on a sports team, you know, we as individuals, we have our own beliefs, we have our own values, we see things a certain way. And then someone comes alongside of us and they see something different. And it really takes an open mindset, a person who is hungry and willing to shift before they can ever buy into someone else's belief. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually your recommendation, I absolutely loved the book, The Truth About Employee Engagement, right? In this book, the author talks about, not to get like super specific into it, right? But he basically takes over a small restaurant and there's a real disengagement with the employees. They really don't care about the job. There's a lack of excitement, lack of engagement and all this stuff. And like what was his approach is he really sat down with each individual person and got to know them, right? I think that he got to know what is interesting to them. Like, why do they come to work every day? Why do they even bother showing up, right? Those things are all super important. And one important concept of that was get to know your audience, but don't necessarily become them, right? You don't want to be the person that you're interacting with, but you just need to know why things are important to them and what makes them tick, essentially.
So Simon Sinek, and we talk about this in Bold, your why, you know, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And
Sure.
when your why and someone else's why aligns, it's not that you have to believe the same way, but you have the same type of vision, values, so to speak, so that you can connect. Has there ever been a time where you've been working with people and you're like, oh, this is not a fit for me?
Not very often. It has happened in the past, and uh, I guess the approach there is I would just try to see it from their perspective more. It actually happened at my first job at Crocs. I think a lot of it really, in hindsight, was my fault, right? But I just was like butting heads. I was working at a startup within Crocs itself, and there were two of us working in marketing, and it was this a woman that I was working with who was actually really smart, really bright, really understood the marketing side of it well, but we're just constantly butting heads on ideas, right? Like she thought she was right, I thought I was right. Actually, another really good book that I highly recommend is this book on crucial conversations.
Oh, yes.
The biggest takeaway from it for me was the fact that we basically sorry, let me just look this up here. We commit or we contribute, right, to the problem. If there's a problem, we essentially it's typically not just one person's fault, right? Like there's a contribution from both people that leads to conflict, right? So if you're really butting heads with somebody, for me, it's kind of like that analytical mindset is step back and like, where am I part of the problem, right? And like, if I can determine that, my behavior in some way is causing this tension, then we could potentially work past it, right?
I love that. We both contribute, and we do, but oftentimes when we're in conflict, we come from our point of view. And there's one of my sayings, I love it, says, do you want to be right or do you want a solution?
Exactly.
And when we can look from coming from a solution versus always having to be right and butting heads and step back, there's always more layers to the story.
Yeah. And this is something that's actually in personal life, just to bring up my wife, Ashley, one of the reasons that I just absolutely adore her is that we are able to, talk through issues and really even, fights are inevitable. You're going to butt heads, especially, at work, at home, things are just going to happen. And sometimes it's not even direct conflict, right? It could be a compilation of a bunch of different stuff. Like I'm frustrated that day. I spilled coffee on myself on the way to work. I've been stuck in traffic. I'm pissed already by the time I get to work. Then I go into a meeting and I find out that like something that I wanted to get done isn't happening, right? And so I tend to get very frustrated there. But taking a step back and being like, okay, you know what? There's a reason why I'm feeling that frustration right now, and I feel like this situation could be resolved in a much more kind of less emotional, less tense way by taking a step back and acknowledging the fact that there are external factors that are at play there as well. And I think that Ashley and I do that really well.
Speaking of Ashley, when you first came out of Bold, and then I was going to talk to your wife, I did a little bit of Facebook hunting, and I came across this video of you two and the aerobic instructing.
Yeah.
So there's a fun side to you too.
Yeah, we try to keep it pretty fun. You know, actually every year for the last several years for our anniversary, we've made like a short video for Facebook. 2 years ago, we went out to actually Venice Beach and we played a tournament together for my birthday, and we dressed up as lifeguards. And then we did, like, Ashley basically recreated the intro to Baywatch, but just with us, right? It was so stupid but so fun, and we love doing stuff like that as well.
So you are a volleyball player.
Yes.
So how does knowing people, how does this connect to playing volleyball? And also, how did you learn leadership skills from them, from
You know,
playing?
I love that question. I actually was just thinking about that. So volleyball, I've been playing pretty much most of my life. Oddly enough, as I was like preparing for this conversation today, I was thinking through like what really did I learn from volleyball over the years, and I think that probably in the beginning not so much. Like I don't know that I was really like really understood what leadership was about. I was never the team captain or anything like that. I just kind of showed up. I practiced with my team, and then I went home, right? Really interesting situation came up recently where we've been playing a lot of doubles volleyball on the beach, and there's a really interesting volleyball tournament format called King or Queen of the Beach. And the format is different because, in essence, it's 3 rounds of volleyball, right? You're playing doubles, but every single round you play 3 games with the 3 other people that are on your net. So each time you're switching your partner for every single game. And so it's an individual competition because you're trying to essentially win the most games out of all the other people on the net and get the most amount of points, right? And what's really interesting to me about this is oftentimes, like, you may know some of the people that you're playing with, but a lot of the time you'll play with people you've never played with before. You may kind of know them, or they may be acquaintances, but you don't really know how they work. So you basically have 5 to 10 minutes of warm up to figure out who is this person, what's their personality like, how do they want to play, what's their strategy and all this stuff. And so you're trying to gauge their strengths and weaknesses very quickly, and then you're trying to figure out what will motivate them, right? Like in doubles volleyball, communication and motivation is extremely important, right? So you're trying to like lift up your partner, and then in the next game you're trying to beat them. So like you basically have 3 people that you're trying to get to know as quickly as you can and then beat all of them, right? And you do that for 3 rounds. So
and you have fun doing it.
Yeah, well, sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it's not so fun, but it's a really, really pretty interesting exercise mentally, and I've been thinking a lot about that.
It's like speed dating with volleyball and then moving on to another partner.
Yep, exactly.
You didn't work out. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It's really interesting. Like some people you'll just click with, and you may not even play that well together, but you just are in rhythm. Some people just absolutely cannot play. Whether it's a personality issue, whether it's a game style issue or whatever. But you do try to like learn lessons, and essentially like the next time you play in that tournament, you're trying to like remember like what did this person like, what didn't they like, and so very quickly trying to build up that skill. And that, again, that comes down to knowing your audience, right? Because in order for you to succeed, you have to make sure that your partner is successful, even though you're trying to beat them after that.
So, and I love the analogy of that, because you talk about it's so important. You need to know what motivates them, but you need to know how to communicate. You might not necessarily agree or even like them, but you still have to figure out how to connect. And every lesson in life, whether it's sports, whether it's relationships, also apply into business. And there are people that we work with in business that is just like you butt heads, like you talked about earlier. Yet at the same time, you have to figure out how to set aside those differences and figure out how to motivate them, how to connect with them so that you get a result that's bigger than just you.
Yeah.
So what's your greatest lesson in life? Like a lesson that you've applied with this, within, it could be life, it could be business.
Greatest lesson in life. Wow, that's a very big question. I guess I would say for me, the biggest lesson that I've learned in just overcoming and adapting to a lot of situations is that there's very few things in life that are impossible, right? Like if you commit to something, then and you really work, and it may really suck, and you might fail at first quite a bit, right? But nothing is impossible, right? And um, one interesting example of that is a personal example, but about 10 years ago, I was really struggling with my weight because I played volleyball in college. Then I abruptly stopped playing and just completely didn't do anything, right? And I put on a ton of weight, and suddenly I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, oh man, like I don't even recognize myself right now. I'm just so fat, right? So made a commitment to really start working on my fitness. It was absolutely brutal at first. I was also smoking at the time quite a bit, so just I could like barely run a quarter mile, like no joke. It was like struggling. I was breathing heavily, and I just said, you know what, like I'm going to do this, and it's gonna suck at first, but I know that like eventually I'm gonna get through it. And so over the course of about a year and a half or so, I went from probably being like 30 pounds overweight to being in the best shape of my life at 30 years old. I quit smoking totally at that point as well. So, that's an ongoing challenge, right? I'm always trying to stay fit, but like that's just one example of something that just seems really difficult, right? But then you just work at it, and it happens. And I think that can be applied to really anything.
So has there ever been someone that you've worked with that you're just like, this is not working, and you've been able to change that around?
Yeah, that's happened in the past. I think that probably the best lesson that I've learned is that if you don't like someone, there's typically a reason for it, right? Like, and oftentimes if you are having a personal conflict, it may just be because you don't really understand the person or where they're coming from, right? So in kind of adverse relationships, when I do run into them, excuse me, what I typically try to do is try to get to know the person, right? Like what's interesting to them, what do they care about, and then take a genuine interest in that, right? And then if maybe there's some overlap, maybe there's a connection, and then finally you find that, hey, we had a conversation about something that is of mutual interest, and suddenly this person is more open, right? And that again like comes back down to knowing your audience and really working on that influence piece.
Well, and that's even the foundation of trust. You talked earlier about, with the marketing, you have to get people to trust you. But in order to create trust, you have to figure out how to connect, because
Sure.
people have to feel safe within a relationship.
Yeah,
So what is your, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say another thing that has always been incredibly important to me, because it's just something that was beaten into me from childhood, especially in the Soviet Union. Respect was just a huge piece of growing up, right? We were taught to respect our elders, we were taught to respect our peers. And so I think that if you approach situations where there's adversity, if you maintain a respect for the individual, and if you show them respect, that you might find that they show that respect to you as well. And even if you can't find common ground, at least sometimes that's enough to make it workable.
Yeah. As you're talking, it reminds me, so this last weekend, Eric and I went away for our anniversary, and you talk about conflict, right? We always have a story, we have our viewpoint, we have our direction, we have our vision, whatever it is that we as an individual want. Well, we're in these amazing cabins. This cabin next to us, we're sitting outside, and all of a sudden we hear this little dog. Well, we didn't know it was a little dog at first. Starts barking and barking and barking. Well, we're on our anniversary weekend. It's like, wait a second, this is supposed to be a quiet place, and it just starts barking. And every time we'd move, it bark. And we're just like, what? And so we had this whole talk about how we're going to go talk to the people in charge and have them talk to the people about their dog. And we're just like, this is not okay. Next thing we know, these young girls walk around the side and they have this little tiny puppy. And immediately the whole conflict that we had created in our mind completely changed. She's talking about knowing you're also just like, oh my gosh, these are young college kids that have this little tiny puppy. And then the story became even more, right? Their parents were supposed to be there. The dad had to go in for surgery. They'd already prepaid for the cabin. The kids are going away to college in 20 days. And immediately, as soon as you have more pieces to the story, there's a different connection. There's a different respect. And if I believe in what you're saying is the more we seek to understand, the more the bigger the vision grows, conflict goes away. It creates empathy, it creates respect.
I love it. I think actually a really, really interesting story there. I think that in some ways it also applies quite a bit to a working environment, right? Because we spend a lot of time at work, pre this remote piece, spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day at the office. You feel like you know the people that you work with, right? But sometimes you really don't, right? You don't know what's happening in their personal life. Like somebody could just be having a really shitty, excuse the language, but really bad week, right? And then, and that's where the conflict's coming from, but you have no idea, right? So it just, getting a glimpse into that can really create an understanding, a mutual understanding that helps you work it out.
Yeah. Dive beneath the surface. So what is your greatest strength as a leader?
Greatest strength? Oh man. I guess it probably is maybe a strength and a weakness at the same time to some extent, but passion. I think I'm passionate. Anything that I take on, I get super passionate about, right? Whether it's marketing, I love talking marketing. Whether it's leadership, I'm super passionate about it now. Like I'm reading a ton of stuff. I'm putting it in practice, right? I actually just hired a really, really great employee named Shelly. She just is absolutely crushing it. And I love exploring these leadership topics with her, right? She's a young and up and coming leader. She's absolutely going to surpass me, I think, in every way. But like kind of talking through some of the stuff that I'm learning with her is really helping me be a better leader as well, right? So just passion for everything, it's sometimes it can be a distraction, or maybe I'm like too focused because I'm too passionate about something. But I think that just being able to grab onto something and like really dig into it is why I probably have been successful in the past.
Could you imagine doing life with no passion?
No, I really can't. I don't know. I mean, like I get fired up, right? Like even this past weekend, there's like 3 professional volleyball championships happening this summer, and I was just like super into it, right? I'm just sitting at home, I'm yelling. I know some of the people that are playing, and I'm just like super hyped up, and that's just it's fun, it's great, and it really kind of like helps me, helps my energy. It helps get ideas and all this stuff. So yeah, passion's huge.
So would you say, do you lead from your heart or do you lead from your head?
I love that question because this is something that I know very much talked about, right? I think what I'm trying to do is find a balance between those things, right? I think I tend to think of myself as a quote unquote maximizer, right? There's a really great book on this, but there's satisficers who are people who are essentially like, this is good enough for me, and maximizers who just have to have the most optimal outcome, right? And with my analytical brain, oftentimes I like overanalyze and I overthink. And one thing that I absolutely love about our company, our parent company, Daikin, has a motto, and it's basically like the 60-40 principle. Just absolutely love it, right? Basically, the premise there is that if you're 60% confident about something, do it. So I've been really kind of working on that. And the thing that we talked about in Bold, the 5-second rule, right? Like if you are spending more than 5 seconds mulling over a decision, you just need to make it, right? You count down from 5, and I'm just like, let's just do it, right? And so a couple of things that I'm working on is finding this kind of like, let's just lead from the heart and the gut to some extent. And especially with like Shelly being on board right now, I'm leaning on her for her expertise, right? So for me, what does that mean as a leader? For me, that means I need to take a step back sometimes, right? And if Shelly has a great idea, I absolutely am just going to say, go for it, right? If it feels right, then let's just do it and see what happens. And, we're going to probably fail here and there, and that's okay. Like, it's not, work is great. It's not a life and death situation. And, in marketing, I'm sure there's lots of jobs where it really is, but that's the benefit of working in business, in my opinion, is that we have the ability to test and do all sorts of really interesting stuff. And sometimes we fail forward, and that's okay.
So what has been your biggest shift in your mindset in the past 7 months?
Biggest shift in mindset. I think just kind of like just do it, right? Like this, not to steal Nike's slogan, right?
That's a
But
good one.
just like I think when I returned from Bold, one thing that I really started working on is being more present in meetings, right? In my communication with people, being able to speak up more. In Bold, we kind of looked at some of my approach of like sitting back, right? As a leader, I would sit back and I would wait and I would get input and I would then kind of like make a decision based on analytics. Now, if I have an idea, I might as well throw it out there, right? Like the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody just says, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. And maybe it's worth defending. Maybe it's not a battle worth fighting, but just kind of speaking up and being more present and more engaged, I think has been the biggest change for me.
That's amazing, because knowing that analytical mind, that is one of your strengths. And at the same time, your strength can become your weakness. And to be able to just do it, that's where so much growth and learning takes place. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't need to know, but you never know unless you actually go out there and do something. That's where growth
Absolutely.
happens.
Absolutely. One other thing that I just absolutely loved about the Bold training is that it provides a framework for communication with people that you maybe didn't necessarily have. It kind of almost establishes a set of rules, right? Because for me, like I report to Carl, who is our president and general manager. Always had a good rapport with Carl. Absolutely love his leadership style. He's very much that truth about employee engagement, get to know the employees kind of leader. Going through Bold provide a connection for us, right? We know that we're kind of like to some degree, like we've gone through that experience, so we're able to communicate in a way that's more open and honest. With Matthew Salee, who went through the Bold training and then came back and launched this absolutely insane Modally Cares program, right? That helped really lift the company and really like lift the first responders and the restaurants in the area post-COVID. Just absolutely amazing story, right? And so now that he's gone through it, our conversations are a little bit different than they were in the past as well. So it just establishes this sort of set of guidelines and breaks down the barriers between communication that may have existed in the past. So it's just absolutely tremendous for me.
It's amazing when we get out of ourselves too. We get out of our own way, and the Modally Cares program, and you're part of it too. I mean, it ended up sparking from one person, but it's one person that makes a difference that influences entire communities, not just in Denver. It was in New York, and then
Yep.
in the East too, right?
Yep, it was. Yeah, it was Denver and Binghamton, and I don't wanna misquote, but I think they delivered something like 2,500 meals and like 5,000 cups of coffee to ICUs in Denver and Binghamton, and also engaged restaurant owners and employees and brought some people back to work who were furloughed. Just the whole thing is absolutely tremendous, and the praise that we got from the organizations both on the hospital side and the restaurant side, I just absolutely I don't even know. It's very powerful, right? And to have Matt come back from the training and just come up with this idea, and then like it sparks something, and then everybody gets involved. That's leadership. You know what I mean?
But and that goes into your topic of knowing people. It's knowing the need. It's looking outside of ourselves, getting curious, getting hungry, saying, what's missing? What do people need? Who are they? What are they going through? How can I provide hope? How can I provide a come along? We talk as well, a leader isn't one that always leads from the front. You don't always have to have the brilliant idea or the one that's making it happen. Sometimes you're leading from behind. Sometimes you're doing the chicken wing, but that's also understanding and recognizing, no, I see the strength in you. I see this potential in you, and I'm going to help you rise in and step into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it up. If there's anyone who has questions for Kirill, so if you're watching on Facebook Live, we can't see access to your questions, so you'd have to come in on the Zoom. But anyone who is watching on Zoom, if you have a question for Kirill, type it in the Q&A, and if you want to come in live, we'll bring you in live as well. So as people are thinking about that, just for you, what is, and I give this to everyone, this is your podium, so to speak. What do you want people to know? What message do you wish this world would know?
Yeah, love that. But I would say learn. Just continue learning, right? For me, maybe part of that, the scientist background, is just my constant thirst for knowledge, right? Just like reading books. Like right now, Shelly and I are reading a book. Every 2 weeks in our one-on-one, we basically go over the concepts of the book that we're going through, right? In my own spare time, I'm just reading about not necessarily topics relating directly to marketing, but sometimes, I read sales books, I read management books, leadership books, I read books about AI, but a lot of nonfiction stuff. And the reason I think you probably can learn actually from a lot of fiction as well. But for me, just reading about what people are doing and how they've done it and how they come up with ideas, things like product design and things like that, just there's something to take away from all of that, right? And so I'm like taking all of it and I'm like pulling out pieces and then I'm putting them inside of me, right? And then I'm using all of that to try and be a better leader, I guess. So if there's one lesson, I would just say keep learning.
Nice. All right, Kate, I'm going to bring you in. So hopefully,
Bab.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so hang on here. I'm moving you to panelist.
I love that my bold mates are on, by the way. Thanks for the support.
It's family. All right, so just click on your mic and share your camera.
Hi.
Oh, so good to see you.
Bab. Hello.
Look at this shoulder movement.
Wow.
Listen, for those of you who don't know, Kirill went through shoulder surgery about 6 weeks before me, and he was my shoulder coach, and he checked in on me before surgery, said this is what to expect, this is what you need to pay attention for, do this, don't do this, I wished I had done this, never ever do this. And he checked in on me every day for the first week, and then every couple of days for the next weeks after that. And so I owe a big thanks to him on my rehab because he kind of paved the way for me. So I appreciate you, buddy. But that is not my question. My question is, where is your unicorn hat, and have you used it?
Oh man, I just moved it downstairs. Actually, I literally had it just sitting here, and I have put it on since put it on for one of our weekly meetings, actually, just for fun, and it's a good time. I love just getting out of my comfort zone here and there as well. So
I secretly hoped you would have it today, so that makes
I know, epic failure.
I should have worn it. Oh man, that's disappointing. Great idea though.
Yeah, well, good to see you, man. Keep it up.
It's great to see
Thanks
you.
for jumping on. I'm glad you're doing better.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Kate. So that was a great just segue into the unicorn hat. What have you done to get uncomfortable in the last, let's say, month or two?
I probably haven't done enough, and part of it is, I don't want to make excuses, but being stuck at home, we haven't really had a lot of opportunity to go out and do a whole lot of stuff. So I really have not done a whole lot of uncomfortable stuff.
What about this?
This I was a little bit anxious, but I think this feels pretty natural to me, honestly. I love this. This experience is really great.
Well, when I got the text yesterday that you'd be on 25 minutes prior, I'm like, 25 minutes? You don't need
A lot
25
of
minutes.
anxiety.
I know, no, you have 5 minutes. Well, there's a couple different people who said, just awesome job. So good to see you. Thanks for the book recommendation.
Love
And
it.
Kirill, I just want to say thank you so much for being on here, for sharing your heart, for giving us even a different perspective. There's one thing we know. We know that it's important to know people, but even the way you share is to truly get to understand what makes them tick. And I love that, the truth about employee engagement. And I'll throw it out there, if anyone hasn't read that book and you work with a team, it is such a powerful, easy read. Because the more you know people, the more you can connect, the more you build trust, the more results that you can get.
Absolutely.
So next week, again, we have Lindley at 11:30 on the 28th, and she's going to be jumping into when your dream is so big and you take the leap, it requires faith, risk, and a lot of sacrifice. So you'll want to be on there. And as we end this, I'm actually going to do a last poll just for feedback. We like your feedback. If you want to be a speaker on one of our upcoming ones in, I think it's September, October, let me know on there as well. And again, Kirill, just thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, for being who you are. And I just love seeing the growth in you. And I want a picture of the unicorn hat.
For sure. And thank you so much for having me on. And again, I just absolutely appreciate everyone who joined and took the time to listen and make comments and all that stuff.
That's right.
Beautiful thing.
Have an amazing rest of your week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will talk soon.
You as well. I'll catch you on the next webinar.
All right. Take care, everyone.